Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abigail Sum, Communications and Outreach Officer at RCMRD. And in this session, I'll take you through storytelling. So we start off with this Native American proverb that I came across. The one who tells the stories rules the world. Something to ponder as we go through this session together. So what is storytelling? It is basically an art. It is the art of conveying narratives through words, visuals, or experiences to engage, inform, entertain an audience. So it transcends just mere conveyance of information. It is basically a potent instrument for nurturing and shaping ideas. So why storytelling in spatial science? Why do we need this very critical skill? So, as scientists, as spatial scientists, we deal with a lot of data and a lot of information. So data informs, but stories inspire. So that is the reason why storytelling is very critical. Science is powerful, yes, but without story, it rarely moves people to act. So let me put it this way. Science explains what is through facts, evidence, and data. I repeat, science explains what is through facts, evidence, and data. However, stories reveal why it matters through emotion and human connection. So science focuses on accuracy, objectivity, and details. On the other hand, stories focus on meaning, empathy, and relatability. So science communicates through technical reports and analysis. On the other hand, stories communicate through characters, conflict, and resolution. Through science, we seek to inform and prove. But stories seek to inspire and move. Science answers questions, stories spark curiosity and action. So this is an interesting quote from Maya Angelou, and it reads, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Why is this quote important? The reason is because storytelling is about creating emotion and a bond with those who are reading or listening to you. In this era of information overload, we have a lot of data being produced every day, for example. And in this era of information overload, communication plays a vital role in bridging science and society. Storytelling basically transforms complex conservation data into relatable, emotional narratives that inspire action, shape policy, and foster community ownership. It is important to use stories to point out key moments from everyday life to help people, policymakers, leaders, communities be aware of how to respond versus react. It makes people trust you more. When you use stories, people tend to trust you more. Data doesn't change our behavior, but emotions do. So as much as we use a lot of data, there is need for us to be able to communicate this data in a manner that connects with the people. or rather the target audience who you want to reach with your information. So what makes a good story? What are the elements of a good story? Now, our goal is to make data mean more through storytelling. That is basically connect the data with people's experiences. Both data and stories play a key role. However, it is important to note that data never speaks for itself. Our interpretation of data may be different. We are going to have different interpretation if there isn't a way to guide us, or rather, to guide us through. I may see a set of data and probably have a different interpretation from my colleague. If there is no guidance through it, we'll both end up with two different stories of the same data. So it is very important that when you release your data, there is a narrative to it that sort of guides people to be able to understand that data. So what makes a good story? A good story will answer these three questions. And what is the context? Meaning, what is the setting? Who is involved? Why should I care? So basically, the place, the ecosystem or area of focus, the characters, the people or communities affected by data insights. It should also be able to answer what is the conflict? Basically, what is the problem or challenge revealed by that spatial data? It should be able to also answer what is the outcome? Basically resolution. Where is it different? The solution or action inspired by these insights. The emotional connection that drives engagement and empathy. So those are the elements of a good story. What makes a good story? How do you link data to stories? So it involves identifying the human face behind the data. Use real life experiences, real life people, real life, basically ecosystem species to be able to identify or rather connect that data to people. Use visuals such as maps, charts and photos. Explain what data means for people and nature. So it's not just about releasing that data, but basically explain what that data means. It is sort of an analysis, but in a way that that grandmother in a village somewhere is able to understand and is able to react or act based on that information. So what I found that usually works is these 5 W's plus H framework, the 5 W's and 1 H framework. So these are basically the 5 W's: what, when, where, why, who, and the H is the how. So when you're developing your story, you should be able to answer these questions. Who is the story about? Identify the main characters, whether it is people, communities, species, or ecosystems. What is happening? Describe the issue, action, change, or discovery. Where does the story take place? The geographical context is very important, especially in spatial stories. When is the story happening? Set the timeline: past, present, future. We've just talked about the dashboards. It's very useful for showing trends. So if you're able to show, what happened 10 years ago versus what is happening now, that is very important as well. And then the why. Why does it matter? Why should I care? Explain the purpose, significance, or the motivation why people should care. And then finally, how? How is the change happening? How is the solution being implemented? It shows the process, mechanisms, tools, or interventions. So that is basically the 5 Ws and H. So when you're crafting your stories, ensure that it answers these questions, so that when someone reads or listens to your story, is able to understand the data that you have presented. For example, when you look at these images that was released by NASA, I think in 2018 or so, it shows the dramatic deforestation in Cambodia. So what kind of a story would these images be? If you compare 2001, the first image, to 2016, there's some sort of change that you're able to see in those images. But how then do you communicate? What sort of a story does these images tell? So they tell a very powerful story of rapid, large-scale deforestation. If you see the first image, there's a lot of green, so it's very dense. And then you look at 2016, it is less dense than it was in 2001. So it shows how dense forest landscapes were dramatically replaced either by agricultural expansion, land clearing, that is between 2001 and 2016. They reveal how quickly biodiversity-rich forests can disappear when unsustainable land use pressures intensify. The progression here underscores the urgent need for stronger conservation policies and sustainable land management to prevent irreversible ecosystems loss. So just from these satellite images, you're able to come up with a narrative that explains what these images mean. And it sort of, at the end of it, like has a call to action, what needs to be done to avoid further loss, further biodiversity loss. So what are some of the tools that are available to us? We've already gone through story maps. So that is one of the, most available tools that we have in telling spatial stories. So the good thing about the story maps is it integrates both maps, text, and multimedia. So you're able to just craft your stories in that manner. There's also Google Earth Studio, useful for creating geographic animations. And then also you can use Canva for infographics, carousels, visual stories. And there's so many other tools available to be able to sort of explain your data in a narrative format, in a story format. Because remember, we said it's not just about relaying the data, it's about how that data connects with people. So how do you turn this data? How do you turn this data into stories? The key thing that to take away from this presentation is storytelling humanizes spatial science. That is the main thing to take away. And effective stories combine both facts, visual, and emotion. Data-driven storytelling strengthens conservation efforts. And then finally, we all have a story to tell. Start with your map, the dashboard that you've created. Those are some of the available tools that you have to be able to just, tell your story and share these stories across all platforms with people. It's not just enough to produce reports. but it is also very important to have a narrative that follows that report. And then finally, there's some resources that I have on my presentation that will help you to explore how to tell spatial stories that inspire action. And with that, I conclude my presentation. So thank you very much.